Happy Tuesday, NBA fiends. Welcome in to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm Brandon Kravitz along with a returning Nick Whalen on the pod today. We will discuss the debut of Luka Doncic along with LeBron James with those LA Lakers. We have more injuries to discuss to players like LaMelo Ball and a mini slate to potentially get into here, all of that. But my man, returning from New Orleans, it was cool to bring on my old friend Mike Tuck on the podcast, the Tuesday episode last week. But certainly missed having the weekly chat with you. So how are things? How is New Orleans?
New Orleans, or those who've played the video game Red Dead Redemption, Saint Denis. It was fantastic. It was my third time there, all time, lifetime third trip. But first time since I don't even know, 2018. I went for one of the All-Star games when it was there. And at that point, I had no money and I was there by myself and I was staying way out in, I think it was Metairie at one of the worst hotels I've ever been to. So this was a proper New Orleans experience, I think, really for the first time. Bourbon Street, excellent, lives up to the hype. Shout out to Caesars. They partnered with us at RotoWire. They put us up at their hotel downtown. That was a lot of fun. We got I think 30 holes of golf in, 40 holes of golf in over 2 days, which was great. The weather, of course, fantastic down there. We're bracing for 8 inches of snow here in Wisconsin in the next 2 days, and that it's going to be 15 degrees for 2 weeks straight. So I needed this. I needed to just kind of get away from this horrendous weather for a little bit. But overall, an awesome experience. I mean, Radio Row, Media Row, it's exactly what you see on TV. It's exactly what you think it is. A lot of people walking around. It saw everybody, I think, in the history of the NFL who's ever covered the sport.
And it's incredible when you have that sort of experience. And as you and I were talking before we went live here, everybody just assumes that because you're around these people, you're having all of these expansive conversations. Yeah. It doesn't really work like that, but there is something special about just being in the midst of that many people that you've watched over the course of your life, or even active media personalities that are at the top of their game.
Yeah, no question about it. You see all those people, and then you're like, yeah, I mean, I guess I could go up to Adam Schefter and introduce myself, but he doesn't know who I am, and he's got a lot of people swarming him. But if anything, it's inspiring, for us, right, Brandon? No, you see all this, you see the $2 million ESPN set, and you're like, RotoWire, we got to get there. We got to be doing our podcast live from the Super Bowl next year.
I don't know that they're in the market for a fantasy basketball pod from Radio Row,
Probably
but
not.
I wouldn't turn it down. I'm looking at the schedule. I guess you weren't able to catch a Pels game over there. It looks like they were out west.
Yeah, I think that was probably intentional, that the Pels were on the road. Smoothie King Center is right down by the Superdome where a lot of the events were happening. So that was one of the first things I looked at when I found out we were going was, all right, let's go catch this red hot Pels team in action, a team that hasn't won a game in a month. But unfortunately they were on the road. But I was telling Alex yesterday on the show, there was a, you get a lot of local radio stations down there. So, there's all the big dogs, ESPN, DraftKings, FanDuel, Bleacher Report, etc. But then there's, all these little local stations. So some station out of Dallas was there, presumably to talk Super Bowl, talk Cowboys. And every time we walked past their table, there was one of their hosts just has his head in his hands. It just, they're talking kind of muted, just no emotion. One of the guys was actually wearing a Luka jersey. So I think they kind of got ambushed. A week of Super Bowl coverage for those guys turned into a week of mourning Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I don't blame them. You and I have not had a chance to talk about that trade. I do want to get into not so much the details of that because I know it's been covered a lot already on this podcast channel, but definitely into what we saw last night. I will tell you, I've been to a Pelicans game in New Orleans. I also, like you, have been to New Orleans a trio of times. The last time was when I proposed to my now wife, was in the city of New Orleans. Ooh. And how did we celebrate? Maybe not that night, but definitely the next night, went to a Pelicans game. And this was back when Anthony Davis was on. I'm telling you, it is it has to be one of the, I haven't been to every arena, so you take this opinion for what it's worth. Has to be one of the worst atmospheres in the NBA.
Yeah, I've only been there for the All-Star game, which was a pretty good atmosphere. It was the All-Star game. I think Anthony Davis set the then scoring record in the All-Star game. This was before All-Star, they was out of hand, but it wasn't like out of hand, like it's been the last few years where they're like, putting up 200. It was also the year that DeMarcus Cousins got traded. I think it was to the Pelicans mid All-Star game. It's like he didn't even play in the All-Star game. Like he was about to go in and then he got traded and just had to sit on the bench the rest of the game.
But you're right. That is pure romance. That is, Valentine's Day coming up. I'm just trying to give the fellas listening a little bit of advice.
Treat your girl to a Pelicans game.
All right, let's dig into last night. We're going to start with the biggest story of the night. Luka Doncic with the Lakers. Sold out crowd, of course. Everybody donning that Luka 77 jersey that they gave out to everybody in attendance. I still can't believe this is real, that this was ever even done. He scored 14 points in 25 minutes, and the Lakers routed the Jazz. The Lakers were plus 17 last night when Luka and LeBron were out on the court together. So I want to talk about the early returns, but I also want to know how you felt about this trade when it went down, because you and I haven't had a chance to dig into this.
I mean, I'm as shocked as everybody was. I don't think I have a Zag opinion on this. One thing I will say is if you want to find a positive for the Mavs here, it's that I do applaud the general boldness of this trade. I mean, I hate the package that they settled for. I do think, Anthony Davis has maybe become a little underrated in all of this, but of course, Anthony Davis went down with an injury in his Mavs debut. So they're already in the thick of the Anthony Davis experience. But, I think Dallas, to make this decision and say, a guy who's pretty much unanimously a top 3 player in the NBA, one of the most coveted assets in recent NBA history, we're just going to trade him because we don't trust him. We don't think he cares enough. We don't think he puts in the time. We don't think he's going to be in the type of condition that he needs to be to lead us to a title. That is one of the boldest moves in NBA history. And I think if they had commanded the return that they could have gotten, I could understand this. But it's one thing to trade him, to basically exclusively negotiate with the Lakers. There was a report that they called the Timberwolves about a certain player. You could guess who that would be. They called the Bucks about a certain player. Both, very interesting scenarios. And I think both teams, said no and probably had a conversation, right? I think if you're Milwaukee, you at least have to think about it, given the age difference, given the concern that Giannis could walk away in a year. But, to bring in Anthony Davis, to not get the Lakers' other tradable pick, to not get Austin Reeves as part of the package, it just, I don't understand it. I don't understand how you could be an NBA GM and not really get how to play the game here, or involve a third team if you need to get more assets. That's the problem I have with it. I don't necessarily have an issue with Dallas putting their foot down because they know more than we do. There's probably more behind the scenes going on with this than has been reported. And if it's just about his weight, that doesn't really seal it for me. There's got to be more to it. But they could have gotten more. They could have gotten more. Mavs fans know it. Everybody knows it. And I think that's what's most frustrating.
I think at the very least, so I'm completely with you. Trading Luka Doncic is not a good idea, but if you're going to do it, then you should absolutely gut the team that you're trading with. And they didn't do that. I really like Anthony Davis. Before he went down with that injury, I'm watching that game against Houston, and I'm looking at them going, why can't that team win the championship? They're big. They're skilled in the backcourt. That to me looks like a championship roster. And then, of course, he goes down. So, and even still, I think winning a championship this year wouldn't even be enough. That's how big of a move that is. You kind of have to at least get to the finals twice, maybe even win a championship. Had they gotten what they got for Luka, along with what they what the Lakers had to give up to try and get Mark Williams, and now that trade has been rescinded. But if you also sent Dalton Knecht, Cam Reddish, and an extra first-round pick to Dallas, I think we could have stomached that a little bit more.
Maybe. I think you gotta have Reeves in there too with how well he's been playing. I mean, it's Luka Doncic, man. Like you give up anything for Luka Doncic. Like that's the point. Like he's Luka Doncic. I think the trade could have been AD, Reeves, Knecht. I guess if you want to toss Reddish in there, and every possible pick and swap that the Lakers can give up. And I think every other team in the NBA would say, yeah, we would still do this. It's a lot, but we would do it. We have to do it. I mean, you look at what Anthony Davis went for. You look at what Rudy Gobert went for. Lesser players have gone for bigger packages than Luka Doncic. I think that's what's most frustrating. I mean, obviously, if you're a Mavs fan, just the idea of trading Luka is inconceivable in its own right. But then to get this like B- package for him is just wild. And we'll see how it turns out. Obviously AD looked fantastic, played like one of the best games of his career before going down. And I think Mavs fans were kind of coming around. Like if you were watching that game, I mean that was a raucous atmosphere. I think it turned from we're going to kill Nico Harrison to all right, this is kind of fun having Anthony Davis on our team. But part of the reason why you're like, I think to clear things up, like everybody realizes Anthony Davis is a great player, future Hall of Famer, NBA 75 list. But this is the reason that you're skeptical of bringing in Anthony Davis. It's the reason that people were skeptical of him even coming to LA. It's like, yeah, we know he's a great player, but every single year you're going through these kind of ticky-tack injuries that end up causing him to miss 20, 25 games. And the Mavs are now already in the thick of that. And, to spin it to last night, I mean, for one, the Lakers are playing the Jazz, who are, this is like the ideal opponent to face in a situation like this, where you now have one center on your roster. We'll see. I still think it could be a little bit clunky. I still think the defense and the lack of size is going to be an issue. The Lakers' avenues to bringing in more capable big men are just not really there. I mean, they'll add somebody. They have Trey Jemison, up from the G League, but like that's like the type of player that we're talking about here. You're not gonna. They're very limited as far as what they can do in the buyout market. The buyout market is not really shaping up to be all that great right now, anyway. So the voiding of the Mark Williams trade, I think, is going to be a huge issue here for the Lakers. It was not last night because they were facing the Jazz. But you could tell, I mean, this re-energized LeBron. I mean, LeBron has already been on a heater for the last few weeks. And, Anthony Davis is a big part of the reason that the Lakers have been so hot over the last month or so. They're 32-19, and they're knocking on the door of like the 3 seed all of a sudden in the Western Conference. But this looked like 28-year-old LeBron. I mean, he was borderline giddy to be out there with Luka. And, the Lakers start the game, first 2 possessions, one from LeBron and one from Luka, lobs to Jackson Hayes, and it just looked too easy from the start.
And Jackson Hayes 6 of 6 from the field, so he's already benefiting. And then you have a third guy in Austin Reeves who's been playing great as well, and he's a really good facilitator on top of it. So you've got 3 guys that can make an offense go, which not only helps when they're on the floor, because it's probably something I didn't take into account enough as I was raw reacting to it the day of the trade, just how much LeBron makes it work with everybody. He did this in Miami. We all questioned it at the moment. We're like, okay, this is a super team, but there's only one basketball. LeBron makes it work, and he's going to pair well with Luka. And the biggest reason why is because of what you said. It doesn't take much to re-energize LeBron. And if you give him a little spark, he turns right back into his prime. When the trade was made, he flipped a switch, and now to see him out on the court with Luka, and I think the same could be said for Luka Doncic. A change of scenery, for the most part, is good for all of us, especially if that change of scenery involves the most storied franchise in the NBA, and you have LeBron James delivering pregame speeches to you. Luka said last night it gave him chills when he went out on the court, and LeBron's yelling at him, "Go be your effing self." I mean, that kind of stuff is it's invaluable. Oh, I don't know what it means for fantasy purposes, because I would think that this takes away from Luka comparatively to what he was in Dallas, because it feels like he's going to play a little bit of a backseat role to LeBron James. It's still LeBron's team. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's what I'm most interested to see. We probably won't get an accurate read on this until after the All-Star break. Luka, you forget, hasn't played since Christmas Day, so this was not only his Lakers debut, but it was his return to action after missing a month and a half. And I think, considering the circumstances, looked pretty good. Certainly was winded early in this game. Looked like he was laboring a little bit, as most players would be when you haven't played in that long. But yeah, I think it's the first time in LeBron's career, and it took until basically age 40 for this to happen, which is insane, that he's playing with somebody who is definitively better than him at this point. And I mean, LeBron still has nights where it certainly feels like he's a top 5 player. And last night was another one of those where if you watch those two, LeBron looked like the better of the two. But on balance, Luka at this point in his career is better than LeBron is. So will LeBron finally be ready to defer like he says he is every year? He's been saying for 5 years, well, this is the year. Anthony Davis, this is his team. He's got to take over. And then like 3 games in, LeBron's playing 42 minutes, and he's the one that's running everything. I think for a talent like Luka, he will be willing to step aside, but I don't think this ends up being like a 1-2-3 type of system. Like Reeves is obviously the 3 here. And by the way, he's been just incredible for a month and a half now too. But I think LeBron is not necessarily comfortable playing off ball. Luka is not necessarily an off ball guy by any means. Neither of those guys have ever really been asked to do that throughout their career. So I think it'll be more of a 1A and like a 1A minus. You know, I think it's kind of a, we take turns. You know, they of course started together last night, and then throughout the game they started staggering their minutes. I think that's more so what it'll be. But in the postseason, I mean, they're going to be on the court together, and Reeves is another great creator who will be out there. It's, you know, it's a little bit like the Suns in some ways, where it's like, all right, you're built around these 3, you know, guards essentially. You know, I know LeBron size wise is a forward, but you know, basically plays a lot of guard. So they are going to have to figure out the 5 situations. Like, can you go into a playoff series against the Nuggets or the Rockets or the Grizzlies or OKC with Jackson Hayes as your only credible center? That's a big question mark. But I mean, like we saw last night, I mean, they put up 72 in the first half, and that was effortless. And you know, they had some careless turnover. I think LeBron had like 7 turnovers because, you know, they were almost just playing street ball early in the second half, where like every time they're getting a rebound, LeBron's looking to flip it down to Doncic. He's doing the same thing. You can just tell they're excited to play with each other, but the quality of looks that they were generating, like every shot for the Lakers was a high quality look, because, you know, are you going to help off LeBron James to go double Luka? Are you going to help off of Luka to go double LeBron? I mean, that's the issue now that defenses are going to face.
And don't ever let me bet on the Jazz again, by the way. I thought maybe, you know, it'd be slow to everyone's just a feeling out process. They were like plus 15.5. I thought it was way too much. And you still had a somewhat healthy roster for Utah last night.
Yeah.
No, that was the Globetrotters playing the Washington Generals last night.
That's what it felt like. I thought they would get off to a slower start. I was with you. I didn't give this out as like an official play, but we were talking about it on the RotoWire NBA show last night. And Alex was pretty firm. He's like, they're going to stop them. And I was like, I don't know. Like, you think back to, you know, I feel like, you know, LeBron has found a way to play with so many elite players over the years, but it usually doesn't click right away. You know, I thought it would be a little clunky. I thought there would be just some, all right, are you going to take this possession? Maybe I will. Not the case at all. I mean, they gelled right away. I did take the under on 9.5 3-point attempts for Luka. I thought that was kind of an insane number, considering that I didn't think he's going to play that many minutes, and he hadn't played in so long. And, you know, Luka is Luka, but debuting for your new team, are you really going to come out there and launch 10 threes? I thought that was
that's sharp.
That was a value prop that was out there last night.
That's a really good one. Before we move on to another topic, Jordy had a good question about someone that we had just talked about. Hold on Mark Williams, sort of a weird scenario with him and then Dalton Connect on the other side.
Yeah, we talked about Mark Williams quite a bit on yesterday's show. So if you want more depth on that, feel free to check that out. You can find it archived on the YouTube channel. I think, you know, Alex and I kind of settled on you hold them through the All-Star break. I mean, the Hornets only play one more game. They play tomorrow at Orlando, and then we're to the All-Star break. There's a pretty good chance I think Mark Williams doesn't play in that game. After the break, I don't know. I mean, obviously he was healthy enough to play before this alleged trade happened, but we don't really know exactly what was flagged on that report. And, you know, there was a report last night that Charlotte is going to try to contest this and maybe push the trade through. I don't know what's going to happen. But obviously, you know, the Lakers are in desperate need of a center. They wanted to do this deal. I don't think they got cold feet and said, let's just cancel the trade. Like, it doesn't make sense for them to do that because they have no other options at center. So I still think there is an outside chance that this trade like could be reversed and he does end up on the Lakers. But I think you have to be a little concerned because whatever popped up on that medical report, it's something that Charlotte either already knew about or would want to address. You know, I mean, that the Lakers were concerned enough to void this trade. And yeah, it's possible that this could lead to another absence for him. But I would just wait and see how it plays out till after the break. Just kind of bad timing on this.
Well, as Nick said, you can check back in the archive yesterday's episode, a more in-depth discussion about Mark Williams and potential injury that at least had the Lakers spooked. Nick, before we move on, tell me about our partners over at Edge Boost.
Yeah, we got 2 great sponsors presenting the pod today. Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or you had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? I certainly hope you have not, but if you have, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cashback on sports betting, DFS, sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. It's compatible for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. You can go to edgeboost.bet right now, edgeboost.bet, and use our promo code ROTOPOD. That's ROTOPOD at edgeboost.bet. We're also brought to you by Pool Genius. You want to win in your golf, March Madness, football pools? Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools. With Pool Genius, users win 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners, you get an exclusive offer over at Pool Genius. Just go to poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or you can start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. I think you may be muted, pal.
You would think that I had that figured out by now.
No.
All right, let's talk about. I was like, wow, what a smooth transition on my part. I'm just
did it again.
Real podcast pro over here. All right, let's talk about some potential shutdown candidates that might make us panic a little bit in the fantasy basketball world. I think a general rule is about 3 weeks till the end of the season when tanking teams start to do this. Does that sound about right for you with the timeline of it all, when you should really be factoring this into any sort of analysis?
In general, yes, but at the same time, it really depends on how the standings shake out. I think obviously a few years ago, the NBA instituted the smoothing of the lottery odds. The bottom 4 records all have the same chance at the number 1 pick. And, the idea of that, I think, was to, of course, curb tanking. I don't know that has worked, because it's opened it up to more teams feeling like they have a chance at the number 1 pick. It's like, I guess it no longer incentivizes you being like the worst team, but there are now 4 spots that have that equal chance for the number 1 pick. So, right now those would be occupied by Utah, New Orleans, Washington, and Charlotte. And, Toronto is really the only other team I think that is on that borderline. They have 3 more wins than Charlotte. Brooklyn's got 19 wins. So, technically they could try to back their way into it. But those are like the 5 teams that we're really watching. And, Toronto, the way they operated at the deadline, bringing in Brandon Ingram, that's a pretty nice starting 5, at least on paper. It's a lot of name value there. You go Quickly, Barrett, Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. So we'll see how much they try to hit the gas, once Brandon Ingram is back. But obviously, they're going to be out of the mix as far as the play-in goes, at least in my opinion. So the Jazz are the number 1 team that I would worry about here. They have already begun their rest plan. This was happening like a month ago. Markkanen, John Collins, Colin Sexton. I was hoping, Markkanen couldn't be traded this year, so that was never going to happen. But I was hoping Sexton and or Collins would be moved, so we wouldn't have to worry about this. But that was not the case. And, Walker Kessler, I think, is in this mix as well. So Utah, to me, that's the number 1 team I would worry about. I would be looking to get off of all those guys if I can, because I do think the rest is coming. Even if it's not a total shutdown, we could still be looking at, all right, you got a 4-game week, but there's a back-to-back, and we'll hold you guys out of that one. Like, it's going to be a frustrating situation, especially if you're in a weekly lineup league. Washington, to me, is interesting. They have 9 wins. Like, they are going to be a bottom 5 team. That is almost sealed up. And, they've been playing their guys this year, and they're still not winning games. No idea what they're going to do with Chris Middleton or Marcus Smart. My guess is they play a handful of games here and there. I don't want it to be in the business of rostering either of those guys. But like Jordan Poole wasn't shut down last year. He's played almost every game this season, and they've still only won 9. So it's not like playing Jordan Poole dramatically increases your chances of winning games. So I don't really worry about him. I don't worry about Keyshawn George. I don't worry about Sarr. I wouldn't worry about Koulibaly.
That sounds about right. I mean, those guys have already shown that they can get Washington where they need to be. I would throw possibly Chicago into the mix.
Yeah.
That's a team that moved off of Zach LaVine. I think that pointed in the direction of where we thought they'd be going here. And I don't think this team is going to go into the tank, but you got to at least consider that Portland would be, just based on where they are in the standings. I love the way this team has been playing, though, and maybe they finally hit that wall that they were eventually going to run into last night, but it feels like they have found some semblance of a core here, and they're like the West Coast version of Toronto, where the record doesn't support how comfortable the front office probably feels with the pieces they have in place. I would be surprised if both of those teams go into shutdown mode in the final few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Portland's been on a really nice run these last few weeks. I mean, they were, if you looked at the last 10 games going into last night, this is probably not the case because they gave up like 140 something to the Nuggets. They were the number one defense in the NBA over the last 10 games. So some sort of switch has flipped in Portland. Denny Avdia has been playing a lot better. And that was a team that, certainly had opportunities to move off of some players at the deadline and opted not to. The interesting thing with Portland is they owe their first round pick to Chicago, but it is lottery protected. So there is like some incentive for Portland to retain that pick. And I don't necessarily think like that would require them to essentially, make the play in, which and like make the playoff field, which I don't think will end up happening. But so they're kind of in this middle zone where they have a very good chance to keep their pick. Do they try to improve that pick? We'll see. I mean, they have no chance. They've won 23 games already. They're not going to make it into the bottom four, but they could be jockeying with Brooklyn, with Chicago, with Toronto when we're talking about those like 5 through 8 picks. So I don't really know how to explain what's going on with Portland. This has been a stunning reversal. A team that had been scrappy. They've had a lot of wins as like a home underdog this year. They've pulled off some games that they probably shouldn't have. I don't know how long this is going to last. I wouldn't necessarily trust the Blazers, but are you tanking to get from the 9th pick to the 8th pick? I don't worry about them nearly as much as I do those teams that are gunning for the bottom 4.
Yeah. New Orleans is a team that we haven't really hit on, but they're right there with Utah, and Utah is already in semi shutdown mode. Should we be worried about guys like Zion? I mean, I'm just generally worried about him and as is, but it feels like New Orleans could be ripe for that as well.
Yeah, they're certainly another team that needs to be mentioned. And, when it comes to them, it really depends on what Toronto and Brooklyn do. Like, do those teams threaten the Pelicans' bottom 4 spot? Because I think at this point, I mean, the season's been over for the Pelicans. They're 12-41. They haven't won a game in like a month. And they're trying. I mean, they're playing their guys. But, you lose DeJounte Murray for the season. You trade Brandon Ingram. Zion's been in and out. McCollum is missing time now with some sort of personal matter. So, yeah, I mean, I think Zion's the first guy you worry about. I mean, Trey Murphy has played incredibly well. I mean, he's been at an all-star level now for over a month, and I would hope he doesn't get shut down. Definitely worry about McCollum, just being a veteran, kind of there's no like developmental piece with him. Whereas like with Trey Murphy, at least you can sell yourself on, we want this guy to play. He's missed a lot of time the last couple of years. Like we just want to keep getting him experience, keep kind of turning him into the player that we think he can be. But, if they're sitting with 15 wins with a month to go, I don't necessarily see the merit in rolling McCollum out there 35 minutes a night. So and I have him on a bunch of teams. So that's one I'm very concerned about.
As you should be, because I don't know that we see him very much for the rest of the season. Yeah. Let's wrap our episode today with the bounce. Your questions answered in a flash. We'll stay on the shutdown topic. Is Walker Kessler a shutdown candidate? He's young, but he's good, and he's on the Jazz, so that creates a lot of question marks.
Yeah, I think he is. The way they handled it last year, he sat out the final 6 games of the season. So that was April 5th through April 14th. It depends on when your league ends. The RotoWire Stake League that we reference all the time on this show, 16-team auction league, our season ends on March 31st, basically to avoid these situations. So in that league specifically, I'm not as concerned about McCollum or Kessler. But again, the Jazz have been pretty aggressive in resting guys already. I think their spot in the bottom 4 is going to be pretty solid here. But again, if your league goes all the way through the end of the season, then I would be very worried about those last couple weeks.
Yeah, sounds about right. Chinchilla wants to know thoughts on LaMelo. Still trying to find a good trade to get him off in a points league. My dream would be Amen Thompson and Cade Cunningham for Melo, and maybe Isaiah Hartenstein. I don't know if you're able to pull that one off. That does seem like a dream scenario. At this stage, how many ankle injuries has this guy had just this season? I can't imagine the trade market's going to be super hot for LaMelo Ball. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. People like LaMelo. The numbers have been great. I will say, I mean, at least in the format that I'm looking at here, Cade Cunningham has been better in a points league than LaMelo has. So I don't think you're getting, I don't think you're getting a men and Cade for Melo. And Hartenstein at this point still an asset, but with Holmgren back, obviously he's diminished quite a bit. I mean, if you could just do Cade for Melo straight up, I would probably do that. Like it sounds like you're looking for security more than anything. Somebody who will be out there. You could look at someone. I don't know. Try to grab Sabonis. Try to grab Tyrese Maxey. Try to grab LeBron, Trey Young, Damian Lillard, anybody like that. Maybe you're taking a slight loss in terms of fantasy points per game, but again, what you're seeking here is getting out from a guy who's always injured and on a team that could end up doing a little bit of tanking at the end of the year.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think we're getting a little greedy trying to throw the Rockets youngster in there as well. Dylan wants to know, should I trade Zion and Jordan Poole for Bam Adebayo, Julius Randle, and Isaiah Collier, scared of the potential shutdown in a 12-team 9-cat league? So we just talked about that with Zion. I think he is a legitimate shutdown candidate, as ridiculous as that is, because you just kind of want to see this guy out there playing basketball, but the Pelicans will have their sights set on the draft. Jordan Poole, I think good analysis by you. I doubt he gets shut down because he's helped them secure 9 wins so far. So why even mess with it? They're in such a good spot. But is Zion a guy that we should seriously consider as a shutdown?
I think you have to think about it. Yeah. Given it's also possible he could just get hurt at some point too. So it's kind of a double risk, excuse me, with him. Poole has been the best fantasy player of this group this season, which is kind of crazy. But Zion, better real life player than fantasy player too, especially if you are in a 9-cat league, so he's going to hurt you in some categories. I think I would just do this deal. I mean, you're getting more depth. Collier seems to be somebody that the Jazz really want to get a look at. He has his flaws, but he's been shooting like 45% from the field over the last few weeks. The assists continue to be there every single night. Randall should be back shortly after the All-Star break, and then you're getting just a really solid player in Bam. So I think this is kind of a home run trade for you to assuage those shutdown concerns.
Yeah, Bam's stat lines have not been pretty lately. Let's answer 2 more and then head on out. We appreciate everybody chiming in on the comment section. Max Christie or Aaron Wiggins? Pick one.
Oh man, what a question. Right now it feels like it's got to be Aaron Wiggins, who's hit 12 threes over his last 2 games. Isaiah Joe is banged up, and they have some other depth pieces. Cason Wallace has been missing time as well. So both of these guys, there are some moving parts. Max Christie's looked great so far, and that looks like kind of a nice throw in to the Anthony Davis trade. But Dallas has also had some injuries. Daniel Gafford, by the way, went down last night in what looked like a potentially serious injury. But Caleb Martin, who they traded Quentin Grimes for, he is not going to play for at least a couple more weeks. PJ Washington has missed time. Some of their other depth guards have missed some time as well. So I do worry that we've seen the ceiling already for Max Christie. Wiggins is you're just kind of looking at for the points and the threes, whereas Christie should give you a little bit more. I'm going to say Christie. This is really, really close. If you need the threes, go Wiggins, but I think Christie could probably give you a little bit more all around.
Yeah, big time stat line last night from Wiggins. He had 24 points in 24 minutes, knocked down 4 threes. The Thunder as a team shot 49% from 3-point range. It's just amazing what that team is able to do from a shooting standpoint night after night. Let's get one more in here. Would you drop Tari Eason to get Keon Ellis? Also, Wiggins or Beal. I imagine they're talking about Andrew. It could be Aaron.
Yeah. Would I drop Tari Eason? Let me see. He's still giving you defensive stats. I will say that. But you also have to keep in mind that Jabari Smith is coming back at some point. Probably, maybe after the All-Star break, maybe a week or 2 after the All-Star break. I think Jabari Smith might have lost his starting spot because of how great Amen Thompson has been, but he's still going to be in the mix. It's still going to take away from Tari Eason. if you can get Andrew Wiggins, I would do that. I mean, I would even consider Aaron Wiggins, honestly, over Keon Ellis. And Bradley Beal, disappointing, of course, but we're still talking about 17 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. He's giving you threes. He's giving you good percentages. You're going to have to deal with the random missed games. He's now missed 2 in a row, as he's done over and over. Looks like he did clarify that it is Andrew Wiggins. So, we've only seen Andrew Wiggins play 1 game for Miami. Was pretty good in Golden State. Kind of got things back on the rails after a rough year. I would drop Eason and go Wiggins, Beal, Ellis in that order.
So we did see the Andrew Wiggins debut last night, and I perhaps should not have thrown too much shade on Bam Adebayo. He was good last night, but just hasn't really been blowing me away compared to previous seasons. But Wiggins, 30 minutes played, 3 of 12 from the field, scored 11 points, grabbed 5 boards, dished out 5 assists. Yep. It's not bad. Doesn't blow you away. And that's kind of what you expect with Miami. I just don't know, without Hero in the lineup, he was a DMP last night, where you get offensive production if you're Miami.
Yeah, well, I mean, they just don't have any other options when he's out. So, yeah, Hero was out last night. Jaime Jaquez was also out. I think both those guys were dealing with an illness. So, it's not going to be until after the break that we really find out what Wiggins' role is. But I'm a believer in Miami maximizing its assets and, getting the best out of someone like Andrew Wiggins, who has been on a number of teams and, to varying results. But I think in Miami, guys do tend to kind of find their spot. So I'm optimistic on Wiggins.
That's going to do it for us this week, or this Tuesday, rather, on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Of course, you can check back with more episodes from our variety of analysts. 4 episodes per week. Got it all covered for you here on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen, back from the Crescent City, and we'll chat next week.